Okay, let's dive in. Ever just, look at a letter, like really look at it,
Uh-huh.
and wonder why that shape or why that sound?
Right. We take them so for granted.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty surprising, maybe even a bit unsettling.
Oh.
Yeah, the possible origins of a letter we use all the time, J.
J. Okay, I'm intrigued. Not the most obvious candidate for a mysterious past.
Right. So our source material for this is mainly centered on an article exploring this really unique theory. It's called Odam Tilly.
Odam Tilly. Interesting name.
It is. And the perspective it offers is, well, it suggests language might be rooted in these really primal human experiences.
Sort of echoes of our first interactions with the
I
world.
kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to unpack this specific theory about J, just as it's presented in this source.
Okay.
We'll look at its claims about the sound, the shape, and see, what insights it might offer, even if it's unconventional.
Got it. Exploring the idea itself?
Prepare for a journey connecting sound, symbol, and some pretty visceral human experiences, according to this one idea.
Okay, let's get into it. The Odam Tilly theory. It translates roughly to human language theory, right?
That's what the source suggests, yeah.
And its core idea is really fascinating. It's saying early human sounds weren't just like random noises we later assigned meaning to.
hmm
Instead, the theory proposes they were directly linked to big emotional or physiological experiences.
So sounds made because of something happening to us, not just sounds about it.
Exactly, like an instinctive reaction that over a huge amount of time got sort of refined and codified into language.
Right, like a structure built on top of instinct.
It's a view that looks for these deep, almost biological connections within language itself,
Okay.
and that really sets the stage for their specific idea about J.
Here we go.
Yeah, the source claims that both the J sound and the letter shape might come from this very deep-rooted, involuntary sound, tied to really significant moments, maybe even life or death situations that early humans saw all the time.
Okay, so language rooted in primal experience.
Yeah.
That's already interesting. But this is where the source gets really specific about J, and maybe a little jarring.
Right. I remember reading this part.
It suggests the J sound, the Joe in jump or joy,
Mm-hmm.
might actually come from a sound made during the traditional butchering of animals, specifically poultry, like chickens.
Yeah, it's a bold claim. It definitely makes you pause.
It really does, an animal sound,
Mm.
becoming a fundamental human sound. How does the article say that even happens? It describes a mechanism, right?
Yes, it does. And it's crucial to understand the source isn't talking about a voluntary cry from the animal.
Okay.
It's described as more of an airflow sound linked to that moment of, well, trauma and sudden physical change.
When the neck is severed.
Exactly. As air is rapidly forced out of the lungs and trachea through that compromised airway.
hmm
The source talks about, the physics of it, air being expelled quickly, maybe mixed with fluids. It creates this sort of gurgled or rasping sound.
Like a sputtering.
Yeah, something like that. The source describes it as potentially sounding like a rough JJJH or maybe jurr.
Wow.
And the theory is this sound being common and obviously impactful for early humans.
Who depended on hunting and processing animals.
Right, it got deeply imprinted. Associated with that specific moment, life leaving the body.
So linked to breath, existence, the line between life and death.
That's the idea, a really profound connection.
So just to clarify, the theory isn't saying the animal sound is exactly the J we use now.
No, not a perfect phonetic match.
It's more like the raw acoustic event became this symbolic seed for that sound in language.
That's a good way to put it. The sound event becomes a powerful symbol tied to a massive experience.
Okay.
The theory argues this involuntary sound, tied to such a fundamental transition, got internalized, and then eventually formalized into the J-phone.
That is quite an image. So, if the sound left that strong an imprint, how does the theory link it to the shape, the visual symbol of J?
Ah, yes. This is where the Odam Tilly theory, as presented in the source, makes its visual case. It argues the letter's shape actually backs up this origin story.
Oh, so.
Well, take the uppercase J, the big one.
hmm
According to the source's interpretation, that hook at the top, that could symbolically be the head of the bird
Yeah.
and the long curve going down, that's seen as representing the separated neck or maybe the falling motion of the body right after.
Huh. Okay, I can sort of picture that. What about the lowercase j?
Similar idea. The theory suggests the little dot on top symbolizes the disconnected head,
Right.
and the stem below it represents the severed neck. So the shape captures that specific kind of graphic moment of separation.
It is definitely a vivid picture they paint.
Mhm.
So the theory draws line from the sound event.
Right, the visceral sound.
So the concept, like life leading to the sound in our language, and to a visual symbol, the letter J, that mirrors the physical action.
Precisely. And what's interesting about this theory, within its own logic, is how it tries to consistently link all those things, sound, shape, primal experience.
It views these things, gestures, shapes, visceral images, as maybe the original building blocks.
That's the core of the Odam Tilly perspective presented here. Symbols tied directly to impactful observations and even physiological reactions. It's a very physical, grounded take on where language might have begun.
Now, the article also tries to find support for this idea in culture, right? It mentions cultural echoes.
It does. It points out how in various languages and cultures, the J sound or similar sounds like Z often seem connected to ideas of force, departure, or energy.
Can you give some examples the source used?
Sure. It mentioned things like the forceful exclamation "ya" you hear in some languages.
Right.
It also touched on Hebrew and Arabic, suggesting the J or Z sounds sometimes appear in names or phrases related to movement or judgment or decisive divine action.
Things involving transition or consequence.
Exactly. And even just looking at English, the source notes how many J words carry significant weight.
Like joy, judge, journey, jump, even jettison. There's often an intensity there.
Mm-mm. So, connecting back to the theory, the source interprets these patterns as possible hints, reinforcing the idea that J might subconsciously carry echoes of those primal experiences.
Experiences of forceful transition, the edge of life, significant change.
That's the connection the source draws. Now, it's really important we add some context here.
Okay.
This Odam Tilly theory, and especially this specific claim about J, it's definitely not mainstream linguistics.
Right, this isn't in the standard textbooks on etymology.
Not at all. Most historical linguists trace letter evolution very differently through established pathways like Phoenician, Greek, Latin alphabets, manuscript changes, phonetic shifts over time, much more documented steps.
So the Odam Tilly idea is more speculative.
Highly speculative, it's almost philosophical, maybe psycholinguistic. It's looking for a primal root rather than using traditional comparative methods.
And the cultural examples.
They're interesting juxtapositions, but linguists would point out there could be many other reasons for those sound associations in different languages. Coincidence, borrowing, independent developments.
Okay, so we're exploring a fascinating idea here from this one source, but not linguistic consensus.
Absolutely crucial distinction, yes.
Good to clarify.
So putting it all together, the theory in this source frames the origin of J through this Odam Tilly lens as a kind of linguistic fossil,
A fossil, meaning.
meaning a remnant. A sound and a shape that, according to the theory, carry this echo of a much older, much more visceral meaning, one tied directly to a fundamental human experience.
The sound from the final breath, the shape mirroring the separation.
That's the story the source tells. The JJJ sound witnessed over and over becomes the imprint. The J shape becomes the visual testament.
Wow.
And the broader implication, according to this source, is that our language has these deep emotional physiological roots, tied directly to our earliest, most powerful observations and responses.
That is, it's genuinely mind-bending. Even if it is speculative, it's a perspective on something as basic as a letter that really makes you stop and think.
It does change how you might look at the alphabet.
Yeah, less like just abstract symbols, more like things potentially carrying these hidden, ancient layers of meaning.
Okay.
Tied to our physical past, we've really unpacked this specific, quite unusual theory about J from the source.
We have. It's definitely unique.
So thinking about this Odam Tilly approach, this search for primal, visceral connections, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other sounds or letters in our language might have similarly unexpected origins? Maybe origins we haven't even considered.
What other linguistic fossils, as the source calls them, might we be using every single day?
Exactly. Without realizing the deep, maybe strange history they could carry, at least according to unconventional ideas like this one.
It definitely leaves you pondering what else might be hidden in plain sight within the words we use.
Something to think about.